Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us in person and on Zoom. I am Alexa Smith, and I am the Educational Exchange and Event Program Manager for the Office of International Programs, and this is Foundations of Global Health in conjunction with the International Orthopedic Trauma Collaborative. Just a little bit about Foundations of Global Health. Global health is an area for study, research, and practice that places a priority on improving health and achieving equity in health for all people worldwide. Global health emphasizes transnational health issues, determinants, and solutions, involves many disciplines within and beyond the health sciences, and promotes interdisciplinary collaboration, and is a synthesis of population-based prevention with individual-level clinical care. And that comes from the Consortium of Universities for Global Health. Global health is a varied and rich discipline to which many healthcare providers, researchers, and faculty aspire to being professionally engaged. With our being a globally connected world, this ongoing programming through the Office of International Programs is designed to feature those in our KUMC community engaged in the field of global health. KUMC's faculty, researchers, and clinicians, our international partners, and our community partners. This series is meant to provide a platform for both presenters and participants to participate in conversations while developing foundational knowledge and exploring best practices for engagement in the discipline of global health. And we will be back here next week on April 29th for snapshots of the trauma epidemic in Ethiopia, Zambia, and Uganda. And now I will turn this over to Parker.
Thank you, Alexa, for that introduction. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hamada, and he will be giving our presentation today. So give a round of applause for him.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Hamada. I worked on this documentary called Trauma, the New Epidemic, and today I'm going to be talking about that and the impact of making a documentary. So a little bit about myself. I am a KU Film and Media graduate with a minor in journalism. When I was at KU, I worked for KJHK as their executive video director. I worked for KU Marketing as a PA. I made a lot of social media content for them. And I did YouTube Shorts for a YouTuber, was able to grow their platform to tens of millions of views, hundreds of thousands of followers in the span of 6 months. And then my most recent work is what I'm doing right now as IOTC's director of marketing and a co-director, co-producer, and the editor on our documentary Trauma, the New Epidemic. So first, before we go into it, I just kind of want to talk about the steps of making a documentary. So the first thing we'll do is outreach. So this will be when an organization or an individual contacts a producer or a director to make a documentary about their initiative or whatever they're doing, and it can be vice versa. So a producer can reach out to a specific organization or group. And then we have pre-production where people in the team plan outlining their documentary's purpose and outline, what they're going to be doing, plan travel and whatnot, what interviews they're going to do. Then we have production where a team schedules and conducts interviews with key individuals and initiative based on what their pre-production plan was. And then we have post-production where an editor or a producer will collaborate with a director to assemble the documentary. And then promotion, where this is kind of like where you start pushing it through festivals, doing local screenings, going to universities, stuff like that. So let's talk about our outreach. So this project started when Dr. Archie Headings, who's on the top right here, reached out to Matt Jacobson about working on a documentary with the film program. And then at the time, I was a PA. I was a student working under Matt Jacobson, and I ended up getting on the project as a PA. And at the same time, which I had no idea of, my older brother was working as a medical student. So things kind of I got really motivated pretty early on. And that's kind of how things started. Matt, is this how to talk via Zoom? Okay. Matt, do you have anything to say about that? Oh, he's not. Okay, that's fine. We'll just go past this. So let's talk about pre-production. For this project, we actually didn't do a lot of pre-production. We kind of got right into things. Though there were some pre-production elements before certain shoots, that wasn't really the reality of things. We had to start documenting the story because things were already kind of on their way. And then production. So this is how we usually set up an interview. This is Nurse Lori Spiresweet, who is the head of our nursing fellowship. and we'll usually have two cameras, one wide, one tight, and we filmed a lot of our interviews here at the University of Kansas. We ended up interviewing deans, medical students, nurses, international fellows. So there was just a lot of different people that we interviewed, but this was kind of where we started our research and, trying to find out what this story was. So this is, we ended up actually going to Ethiopia after receiving some donations to continue production. And this is our team in Ethiopia with the provost. So we actually ended up traveling twice for this documentary. So after raising $30,000, we were able to bring a team of medical students, production students from KU Film, myself, and so much more to collaborate with these people. This is, so we ended up filming in Abet Hospital, which is a repurposed hotel, and it serves as Ethiopia's only public trauma hospital, which serves 120 million people. And this is Betsy Armstrong filming near the pediatrics unit. So we had a lot of film students involved, and the process of filming an environment like this was quite challenging at first, but we ended up getting consent and having to do some paperwork with the with St. Paul's and this hospital, and made sure to get consent and sign consent forms before we filmed with anyone or talked to any patients. So this was one of my favorite interviews. This is Dr. Netsonit. She is the head of orthopedics there. This was a really eye-opening interview for me. It's just during this interview, I really realized, how knowledgeable these people are. And hopefully, I think some of it's in the sneak peek, but we will see. And this is a medical student on Jack Aries, working with Dr. Abby, which is who was one of our international fellows. So during these educational experiences and while we were there, medical students were able to scrub in and get to see things that they typically wouldn't see, higher caseloads, and things that we wouldn't see as a medical student here in this system. So I thought that was unique. And this was my favorite shot that we filmed during the documentary. So over there, they don't have the right screw sizes. So they ended up having to cut screws to fit whatever they needed. And so we have a shot in the documentary, will be shown later on in our sneak peek, where they're just cranking and cranking and cranking, barely able to cut the screw. And then the edge of it, the tip of it is not straight. So that can cause a lot of problems. And it's just something that, we have here in the United States. We have the right screw sizes. So it really, I think this is one of the most impactful things for people in the United States to see. And I don't know if is Matt on yet. Well, that's something Matt wanted to talk about there. He was talking about this. Basically, pretty much there was this scene he filmed where there was a lot of people working on the surgery, and we had people from both the U.S. and over there, and it was a very beautiful shot because someone would put their hand in, and then as soon as they moved it, someone else would come in and just continue doing the procedure. So that's the shot he wanted to talk about. So that's what I put in there. And then afterwards, after we came back from Ethiopia, we did a lot of interviews with kind of following up with everything that we captured, following up the story, continuing our research. And this was one of the interviews we did with Dr. Headings, which is a key interview in our project. And here he talked about a lot of the industrialization that occurs and just kind of what the next steps were. But that's something that we did as well after people went on these experiences. We just continued to document and ask questions. So let's talk about post-production. So the first thing in post-production that we'll do is organize the footage from the date to the specific card or camera on that day. And this is one of the most important things to do. It takes a long time. And even making proxies, which are just lower res versions of the file, so we can repurpose the footage and use it for different things that I'll talk about later. And then we did a lot of transcriptions just to keep our research. After we interviewed these doctors, I had a team of film students, including some of the people here, who went through the transcripts and ended up putting transcripts together so the whole team, so we could collaborate with all the healthcare professionals on both sides. It was very important for everyone to see everything, and things had to be transparent if we wanted to tell the story correctly. And then editing, which is something that I did. And that's just putting clips together after, you put those selects and transcriptions together. So that's kind of the process of putting a documentary together. And now kind of getting to more of the important things is the promotion and how we use it. So what we did was we put together certain cards before we went and spoke to communities before promoting this event, which basically had a synopsis and some information. And this kind of thing was really important for people in the community to really have an understanding of what we were doing. So we went to some Ethiopian churches and so many other things. These cards have been everywhere, even here. I've seen a lot of medical students handing them out. So that is one of the first things we did for promotion. And then this is our trailer. Should I just click it? Okay. Is audio working? Yeah.
I was born and raised in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. This is the capital city of Ethiopia.
I have been working as general practitioner and orthopedic trauma surgeon for the last 3 decades.
The number of healthcare facilities is grossly insufficient to provide modern healthcare to all the people in Ethiopia.
Almost 50% or more of the cases is pediatric trauma. They come after 3 weeks or more, 3 months, 6 months.
35 or 40 and younger than that, the major killer of those people is trauma.
We are overwhelmed with our patients. It's really challenging and demanding. So you do have different referrals. Patients came from almost 1,000 kilometers away from here.
It was a hotel that was transformed into a hospital. It was just completely immense for me, coming from, a level 1 trauma center and academic institution.
It's really hard to see those people struggling because it's not anything they did. We were all born in a certain location. I was privileged enough to be born in Kansas.
This moment, all of a sudden, the power goes out, and it goes.
Oh my goodness. So this is the time to pray.
So that was a trailer that we put together pretty early on. And after we came back from Ethiopia, and we kind of used that for a lot of promotion, get people talking. And, if anyone needed any information on the work we were doing, sending them that trailer was a good way to start. Some other ways of promotion, we were featured in KU News. So we reached out to, Rick Hellman reached out to us about doing an article on us and Matt Jacobson and the work we were doing. So this is just kind of one of the first ways a lot of people in the university started, being aware of what we were doing. There was other articles within the health system as well, and a couple of segments on Take 5, which is the University Health Systems TV show. And then this was after our first film festival, Uplift Film Festival, where we ended up winning an award, Best Documentary Short. We had a couple news articles there. So just us reaching out to them, talking to people was very important to be networking at these events and just keep things moving forward. That's our award. And then most recently, we did KC Film Fest International, which was on March 27th to the 30th at the Board Parkway. We actually ended up selling out our first screening in a matter of days. And then our second screening ended up selling out before the festival technically started. So we did really good with those cards going out into the community. And there was a lot of Ethiopian people there. And I think that was the most important thing, was just them being there and giving us that feedback, because I think that feedback is very critical to making sure that this is a collaborative project that's telling the truth about their story. So we won the Kansas City Film Fest Audience Choice Award there as well. So that was cool, being able to go to 2 festivals and going 2 for 2 on an award. It's just an experience not a lot of people get to have. So a lot of connections were made there. So many things are happening right now. So what's the purpose of all of this? So there can be many purposes in making a documentary, from raising awareness on a specific subject, amplifying voices for people who, might not be able to have a voice, preserving history, influencing policy, investigation. So there's investigative documentaries, fundraising, to motivate people, or just purely entertainment. So these are the categories that our documentary falls in between. So we want to raise awareness about the ongoing trauma epidemic that kills over 5 million people a year, more than HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, or malaria combined. We want to amplify the voices of the people within the Ethiopian healthcare system. We want to influence policy, both domestically and internationally, through our work. For example, allowing more fellows to come train, there's current limitations on what they can do when they're here, but certain states actually allow them to do more, and some even allow them to operate. We wanted to investigate the Ethiopian healthcare system while investigating our own. This type of investigation can hopefully, expose certain problems in the healthcare system on a global scale. And then we want to raise funds for orthopedic equipment, educational experiences, hopefully building a hospital on the line, so many different things. So I want to talk about this other documentary, which kind of inspired a lot of the work we're doing, and we'll show kind of what that purpose can do. Should I just admit that?
It's not one person, it is an entire mindset to build stable institutions where none existed. To me, that is about hope. Health for All is the future.
And Partners in Health was formed.
We started finding these tuberculosis patients.
There was a big hole in the program.
They do not know what watches and clocks are.
They don't believe that we have an equal right to life.
The current Ebola outbreak is the world's deadliest to date.
This is the worst thing any of us have ever seen.
When we took the blame off the patients and put it on the system, everybody got better.
Everything we do was with the community and for the community.
Tout monde c'est moun. Si moi-même k'ap viv jodi, am ta reme pou l'autre malheureux yo viv tout.
So that was just a snippet of that. So Bending the Arc was released in 2017. It was directed by Keith Davidson.
When you're smiling, when you're smiling,
smile. Sorry about that. How do we get it back to?
Yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Ask Alexis.
Yeah, we had some very interesting issues last time. So this documentary was directed by Keith Davidson and Pedro Coast. It's about a group of passionate healthcare advocates on a collaborative mission to transform global healthcare. In Haiti, they confront extreme poverty, deadly diseases, and a broken medical system. They challenge the global health establishments to address epidemics like tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS. Their grassroots efforts deliver life-saving care and ignite a movement that continues to impact lives around the world today. So I actually highlighted some similarities between our projects. First of all, this kind of work needed to start with a group of passionate individuals. Collaboration is a must in this situation because we're trying to build something sustainable. So that, and then addressing epidemics, that's obviously, we're addressing the trauma epidemic, and then grassroots efforts. I think that's a very key one here in our similarities because everything here is grassroots within the university. We have architects from KU School of Architecture, we have physicians from here, we have medical students, we have film and media students, all within KU. This whole thing was grassroots. And then we want to deliver life-saving care and ignite a movement. So this is some of the things that Bending the Arc was able to do in the sense of impact. So with educational integration, this documentary was incorporated in curriculum at a university level at Stanford, Harvard, and this partnership with ProQuest, which has enabled schools to show it worldwide. And then policy influence. This is Dr. Jim Yong Kim, the former president of the World Bank, and he used this documentary as in its themes to advocate for health equity. And he uses this as a piece of influence, a piece to influence global funding strategy. And then we have motivation. So this film on the top, that is someone who was in the documentary. His name is Melquiades Uyaya, or I hope I'm saying that right. He's a patient from Peru, and after this documentary, he was who dealt with tuberculosis. He did, and he was able to actually become a global advocate for this. And then on the bottom is Sandy Hers. She's the director of global partnerships at the time for SCAL, and she talked about in an article about how this project motivated people to change careers and be more ambitious about careers that are for social change. And I think there's a lot of similarities there, because a lot of people in our project are motivated to do so much, and we're just starting to get out there, and I'm starting to see a lot of differences. So, and then media recognition. So this film ended up being on Netflix in 2020, and it premiered at Sundance. So it was able to reach a pretty global scale in the sense of media recognition. And then funding, they funded for Partners in Health, and the Harvard Gazette actually wrote up an article where they talked about how from 2017 to 2019, in just 2 years, with just local screenings, community screenings, university screenings, they were able to raise $20 million. And this is before the national media recognition. So already as a tool, a documentary can do so much. So before, I want to show you guys a sneak peek of the documentary. This is a part of the documentary where we focus on Ethiopia. It's the perspective, kind of showing what their hospital looks like, the repurposed hospital. So.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it has been a long time.
It has.
Yeah.
You look great.
Yeah, you look younger every time.
So this building was initially built as a guest house, as a hotel. So we don't have like furnished and also well-built hospital. So we rent it and we change it into well-equipped trauma center. Abet Hospital, it is designed to serve Addis Ababa. It's the only hospital which is dedicated to do emergency and trauma service. They visited local centers. They didn't get any treatment, then they go to the primary hospital. The primary hospital refer to the secondary. We are supposed to be a tertiary hospital. So every hospital will send the patients to this hospital. Here again, the patient is said, no, we are not able to do this. So where can I go?
All patients are waiting for OPD evaluation. So since the room is full, some of the patients are waiting here.
So how many patients do you have waiting, Dr. Solomon? How many think?
80 times 3.
So about 240.
240 patients daily.
Daily?
Yeah, daily, yeah.
So your financial clinic has been going for 2 months, you said?
Yeah, almost 2 months.
Almost 2 months, okay.
Almost 2 months. Just
Okay.
starting point now.
Okay.
After the fellowship, we started here working foot and ankle unit. It's the first ankle unit as a whole in Ethiopia. And now the patient coming here, patient who has road traffic accident, fall down accident, deformities. The patient couldn't even talk what he feels clearly because he frustrated because of he is looking left and right.
I had the privilege of working with Dr. Solomon in the United States at the University of Kansas, now visiting him here in his clinic. We're in one big room with a couple of computers, and multiple patients are sitting next to each other with multiple histories being taken at the same time.
I had never been to Africa before. What surprised me about Abet Hospital was everything. It was a hotel that was transformed into a hospital. It was just completely immense for me, coming from a level 1 trauma center and academic institution. When you see the number of people that are in Addis and the amount of road traffic accidents that they take care of every day, and then you're exposed to the facilities there, when you see 4 patients all in the same room with their families in that same small room and no air conditioning, makes you reflect on your facilities and also understand the challenges that they face trying to provide care for their patients and get the best outcomes they can with the facilities and resources that they have. I very quickly came to realize that their resources do not define their ability. They are amazingly intelligent and skilled surgeons.
I decided to pursue trauma care because during my medical school there were a huge number of patients who didn't have a good orthopedic care. There was only one orthopedic surgeon in our hospital, and huge number of patients who needed trauma care were coming. The number of beds, the infrastructure was a bit limited in Abed Hospital. I have only 1 OR table per week. Imagine I can do only 4 or 5 surgeries per week. That is the maximum limit.
In Abed, there is road traffic accident, falling accident, and blunt injury and gun injuries. We don't have adequate supplies, so we don't have adequate our orthopedics, implants, screws, everything. We have a lot of scarcity.
The standard in the OR is solid surface flooring. We just don't use tile in the operating room, and you can even see that these have cracks. The grout lines, it's all very dirty. There's blood on the floor. It's hard to clean it out of a hole in the ground, and that just breeds bacteria.
The nurses in Ethiopia, they have a lot more responsibilities than what we have in the operating room here. The nurses take the instrumentation after surgery and they start the washing process.
So they're hand washing everything first before they sterilize it, so it can miss bioburden or any debris that might be on there, which can cause contamination. So
washing machine?
Yeah, we have a washing machine, like a big washing machine. We put our sets in there.
It's working, but the water is not okay.
Also, just hand cleaning, it's all contaminated with blood and tissue, and it puts nurses at risk, so, or whoever's handling the instruments.
The nurses are in charge of their own scheduling as well. They're in charge of cataloging the implants that come in and making sure that they have all of the correct plates and screws and things like that that might be needed for a surgery.
So she keeps track of what they have. And this is some of her, the implants that they have. And here is where they keep the sterile instruments so they can come in and pick the instruments that they need for a case.
This is orthopedic instruments.
So one of the biggest realizations I had while working alongside nurses in Abbott Hospital in Addis Ababa was that there are so many similarities. We share a similar language that we speak. There are standards that are evidence-based and we as nurses follow them. But there's also this subtle language that we use that just comes with being a nurse. Even with limited resources or limited space, we're still speaking that same language. There's also very important differences. They're having to do with much less. They're repurposing and reusing instrumentation, supplies, and they have limited access to implants.
Bone is the framework. If they lose that bone, they cannot work. They cannot live also.
So what's going on here is they don't have the appropriate screw length. So to get the right screw length, they have to cut the screw with a bolt cutter.
All right, someone got this? It's done?
Yeah.
Turn it. Are you breaking?
So this situation always delays the surgery.
Look at that point. See that point? Now hold up the end of your cut screw and turn it around. So now here's the thing. That may seem like a small issue, but when you take that tip off the screw, if you're putting a screw in a bone, and if that screw takes the wrong trajectory, and it could hit a major vessel that it could cut through and kill the patient, it's a really big deal. So little things like that in surgery. Not having the precise length screw and then having to cut a screw, it actually can be dangerous for the patient.
Okay, so that is our sneak peek from our documentary. So right now, our documentary is about 33 minutes long. We're using it as a documentary short. That's kind of how we're doing it. We're using it more as a raising awareness and fundraising tool currently. We just got connected after KC Film Festival with some major connections up in New York, who want to turn this into a feature. So we will see what happens there, but there's so much work still going on with it. But as of now, we're really just trying to use this documentary and screen it in front of as many communities as we can, as we are doing it right now. So if anyone has any communities that want to see something like this, please let me know. So next, I want to talk a little bit about social media. So on top of everything we were doing, I started kind of developing a marketing department for everything, creating social media, working on a website and whatnot. And so far on social media, we were able to gain about 24,000 views. And I just want to talk about the impact of this. You know, if you look at the locations, 42% of our viewership is coming straight from Ethiopia, and we have heard, and a lot of those viewers are people within the government even. So like sometimes, like when we filmed a reel, put that reel out about the floors, we made it into a little reel. That was able to go up to the government level and even create change. So the impact of social media to date has been pretty impactful. And I wanted to show you guys just an example.
It looks like we have a patient and we haven't opened up a sterile field yet in the United States. That's just not how we do it. We'll have our sterile field set up before we even get a patient in. We'll make sure that everything is ready as far as our instruments and gowns and dressings we have available and ready before we even have a patient in the room, so that if we need to replace something, we can. So we're not putting the patient under anesthesia without having all of our equipment ready.
Yeah. And I do want to mention, thank you, Lori, because a lot of the reels with Lori have gone viral. So she has been a very important piece of our social media and just someone who speaks regularly on there. But that should pretty much be my presentation. So we're going to do a panel. Should we set that? Panel. Yeah. Also, I brought Casey for the panel. Yeah.
All right, we're going to get set up for this panel. My name's Lexi. I'll be moderating the panel today. For people who haven't come or people on Zoom who haven't had our panel, this is just a time to ask about the documentary, the process of making the documentary, as well as different things that our organization is doing. So yeah.
And on the way down,
All right, I'll start off our Q&A with a question here first, and then we can open it up. Just raise your hand later if you have a question. So to start off, obviously we're an organization that has started in Kansas, and we ended up all the way across the globe. So what steps did you take to ensure that the community that we entered in felt respected and empowered by the stories that were being shared?
I'll start from the media side. I'm sure Dr. Adams has a lot to say about it. Well, I think this kind of the most important thing is transparency, is making sure that everything is done collaboratively. And it's kind of like why are we going into the community and going to different Ethiopian churches or communities to have them watch this before, we make it such a public thing. So I think just having someone from their team there is probably the most key thing in my eyes from the media perspective.
I didn't go until I was invited, so I didn't invite myself, number one. So I was invited everywhere that I went. And then I was given advice by a physician, also an orthopedic surgeon, Lou Zirkel, who started what's called Sign Nail, which is a type of orthopedic implant to treat long bone fractures in low to middle country. His advice to me was, if you go to another country, just go in and just ask for help. Just say, what can I do to help? And that is the attitude that I took. And I think when you go in and just say, what can I do to help? Everything naturally flows from there.
If I were to add a media perspective, during our time in Ethiopia, when we went outside of the hospital, we were invited to a church. And neither Bacher or I or Delilah, members of that church, but when we came in to come to respect, you adhere to the traditions that they provide for you. So long as you understand the perspective of the people that you are there to experience, and with an understanding that you're a guest, just have to be courteous, be kind, leave them.
Yeah, I think the tag team offer Dr. Heidi said too, is as this organization has grown, we've included Ethiopians on our team, native Ethiopians here in the United States, and then also in Ethiopia. So maintaining that relationship, having them part of our organization, I think is critical as well. And I think that creates rapport as we create documentaries as well.
Do we have any questions? And okay, I have a list. All right, next question. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in the storytelling or production process?
I wish we did more pre-production. I think that's the one thing that, in our situation, it would have been hard to, but pre-production and really good organization early on just technically makes things a lot easier. And, just double checking, for like, there's some patient interviews that we did that, we got consent for, but we didn't get the right kind of form, to where like there's certain things the university can't promote if we talk about patient, like if a patient's talking without this exact kind of form, and that's things that we learn along the process. So just making sure that we're going through the right processes,
I have to agree on the pre-production, although it's easy to say that in hindsight because we were only halfway through the process by the time we were going over and filming, because part of this documentary is the breakdown afterwards. What do we change now that we've seen Ethiopia? For me, during the production process, it's a wider net. I wish that I had the camera running more and more, and another camera just constantly filming. Because once you run out of footage to use, it's how much footage can I reuse without making it stale? How much can I go back to without making people disengage? And I just want more.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about this is that when kind of what Dr. Heddings was saying is that kind of go when we're invited. So in order to plan, which would have been wonderful, I agree. I think having some sort of plan in place would have been great, but it's kind of like, sometimes it can be like, okay, we're going, and so the trip where we were filming, it happened pretty quick. And so for us, a lot of it was just like, let's capture that. And we weren't even sure what the story was at that point as well. So I think that now we have that experience. I think going forward, we might have more on that pre-production side, but prepared kind of narrative and kind of where we're going with it.
I would even say afterwards. On the second trip we went on, we were a lot more prepared for that. And now by the time we go again, we'll know exactly what to do. So it really just takes experience to get past a lot of these.
I think part of it is understanding what moves the needle in terms of getting public support to do something about a problem. And I tend to think about things academically and as a physician. If I want to treat a patient, I have to get the precise diagnosis. To get the precise diagnosis, I can prescribe the right treatment, but I have to be very meticulous in applying that treatment. And then the patient gets better. And I approach this work in the same way. I was trying to get a precise diagnosis. Why is there a trauma epidemic? And I was doing all this research into what is driving all these road traffic accidents. Why is there so much conflict-related trauma with high casualty rates, which you have non-combatants being injured? Where in the world is the self-harm epidemic coming from, and what's driving that? Why is there so much rape in the Congo? And where in the world are these work-related injuries coming from? Why are there so many children working in mines for cheap labor? And I did this deep dive into trying to make a point of, please understand, there's a trauma epidemic occurring that's killing more people than HIV, tuberculosis, and Ebola combined. And the data is dry. That doesn't move people to action. And one thing I saw when we went to the film festival was stories move people to action. And I'm not on social media that much, but you'll see there's a lot of things that grab your emotion, and man, you can just go down this deep hole. And I wish we could mesh the two of good, thoughtful, research and understanding into what's driving this problem, but also at the same time, there is an emotional appeal, right? And we all see this every day. These things profoundly affect people's lives. And if there's a way we can get that out, I think that would be, you combine those two, you've got a really good way of bringing action to this problem.
Any questions? Yes, and I think research, as Matt is saying, is key. I think this whole thing that I've learned from this is research, and because we're working with healthcare professionals, both here and internationally, they know research, they know how to approach research. So, from the filmmaker's point of view, maybe it's a little atypical, but it was like a research project. We went in there, we did interviews, we got information, we found our firsthand sources, and we created a research paper. It's a documentary. So, yeah.
All right. What do you hope viewers carry with them after watching this documentary?
I think the most important thing that I want is them to feel like they were there, them to feel kind of the perspective of being overseas, the same feeling that a lot of members on our team got when they went overseas. We did get some emotional reactions like that in the small screenings that we did. But that's kind of the most important thing. People just need to be aware. It's not like we're looking for much. I think the number one thing out of this documentary, the best thing someone can get out of this isn't donating or this or that. It's being aware of what's going on in the world. And, it talks a little bit about how, our Western technology is involved in trauma. So just being aware of these things, I think is very important.
If I were to be completely honest, I would say a sense of ownership. Because it is a little guilt making to see your own hand in international trauma, especially on the side where it's the minds that make your phones that are causing trauma. It's the industrialization caused by your hand in things, if a little bit indirectly, that cause the trauma. And if this documentary forces people or in some way puts a little bit of that ownership into them, they may feel that they can get involved on the positive side too. And so making them feel complicit would also make them be able to be complicit in the solution as well.
I think for me, it would be a sense of curiosity. I hope people will take away a sense of curiosity as far as what's happening in Africa, what they can do. I want them to want to know more and hear more and keep following along the stories. So for me, I think that would be my biggest takeaway.
Mine goes back to philosophy 101 in undergrad. Just the belief of Immanuel Kant that we all have within us a law, and we're a law unto ourselves. And even the title of that Paul Carpenter movie, Bending the Arc, Paul Carpenter chose, from my understanding, he chose that title because he says there's an arc in history that bends towards justice. We all have within us this sense of justice. And so what I would like to communicate is that there is an injustice, that it does affect people's lives. And, it is something that is fueled by our desires. And that will hopefully, result or spur some kind of change.
And then we had some comments in the chat as well.
Matt said, we are letting people know that there is a problem and they have a role of creating the problem, and we are trying to solve one aspect of this problem, and they can help. Matt is my co-director on the project, and that's his answer.
So now that this documentary is made and is out there and it's in screenings now, this is sort of like a template as we move forward for future projects. Where do you see future documentaries and this organization going?
So if we're talking about where going, so this organization, ATI and IOTC, we're doing work in Zambia, and there's some more places that we're looking to explore. So we still want to document a lot of the processes that are going as we're making impact. So like if we're going to send a shipping container somewhere, we want to follow along with that process. So I wouldn't necessarily say the next step is necessarily from our point of view to make another documentary, but it's more so just to continue working on social media, kind of building out this marketing efforts to raise awareness in that way, because I think that's how you get people nowadays a lot more than a documentary. But at the same time, we just want to continue to just screen this and see where that takes us. I don't know what the next project will be, but I know that we have something right now that's powerful and is making an impact that people need to see.
So here's the grand vision, which is lofty. And I want you to think about this because we are sitting on the edge of what could be a healthcare revolution in terms of delivering surgical care. If you can go to about every country in the world and you can get some type of vaccination, because international efforts to have these vaccination campaigns and make them available have been very successful. But where are there disparities in the delivery of healthcare? One of the biggest disparities in the delivery of healthcare for surgical disease such as trauma. And that is why we see so many people dying as a result of trauma. But there is no surgical analogy, or there's nothing comparable in surgical treatment to like a mosquito net or a vaccination campaign. To deliver surgical care, you need a well-designed hospital that's well-equipped with a well-trained surgical team. That's a tremendous amount of resources. And one issue with putting a hospital down like that in a place like Africa is you don't have a power grid, a structure, a good sewage system, a good power system, a good telecommunications network to tie into these hospitals. But now, with this renewable energy revolution, sustainable energy revolution, where we can power things by, solar power, by wind, by hydroelectric, we now are having the ability to place hospitals in areas that you never thought even conceivable before, because we can generate power in places that you never could think of generating them before. A good example is this hospital that Health Facilities Group helped build in Tinwood, Kenya, which is a $30 million cardiothoracic hospital that was they talked about in our last lecture, that they power off of a hydroelectric dam from a river that's nearby. So forward thinking and raising awareness about this, we would love to see hospitals throughout Africa that are able to deliver high quality surgical care, and primarily, powered by renewable energy and things like this. I mean, because that's really what we have to use. But that's where we would like to go, and see surgical care delivered in Africa just like it's delivered here in America.
Yeah, so I think it's just to bounce off of that and what Backer said. I think future projects, we're just going to keep telling the story as we grow and as we achieve our mission, which is to educate, equip, and build. So we want to keep telling that story, however that looks, and wherever we're invited to tell that story.
All right. Question.
Would you guys consider partnering out with other disciplines from the School of Health Professions to further these kind of projects?
Yes. We all say yes.
We do.
Whoever wants to be, really. We don't have enough.
It's essential.
It is, really.
We're collaborating with branches of the health. We don't get nurses. We've got we just partner with the infectious disease department, public health, public African studies. It's all collaborative for sure. And building, the thing with surgical care is that it does take a team also of health professionals. So it can't be done without that collaboration.
But we need people from public health. We need people from all over. Yeah. So, did you have something in mind?
Yeah, I'm bringing it out on part of the respiratory care department, university, IOTC. We're going to Ghana in less than a month, and we do very similar programs with NRP. You're really similar to NRP, just at a very basic scale, resuscitation skills for midwives, the people in the villages, not necessarily healthcare workers, on how to do resuscitation with that first minute of life, kind of go from there to hopefully help with death rate of neonates over there, which is very high. So the director of the respiratory care department has been going for 20 years in a row. Patients are very strong, and I think you guys would be a great fit in trauma team.
Yeah, we need you.
Yeah, we should.
That's why I'm asking.
No.
I think I could, you guys, the direct individuals that are considering the trip and the ones that are at the top of everything. Because I know in a surgical scale is much more complex. There is a bigger team. Right now, we're kind of tackling from the very basis, which is just basic BLS, NRP skills, and I think you guys would be a great fit.
I think connecting is very important, regardless of how we love to just hear about what you guys are doing and have a conversation. So I'll give you my contact. We'll talk. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So one of the other things that we've kind of noticed when we go into these low to middle income countries is that nurses are functioning in a role of like many roles. So one of the things is that we're educating nurses. We need people like you to help train, nurses or work in how we're training nurses, because we don't function as respiratory therapists here, right? But their nurses might be doing more of that. They don't have respiratory therapists, as far as I know.
I was operating one time and I wanted to know how the patient was doing, so because I heard him wheezing, the patient's prone, I'm doing this big surgery, and I looked up and there's nobody there. They just took the patient sick and walked out of the room because their resources are that small. The anesthesiologists can't be everywhere, and they don't have a CRNA. So, so all these programs need to be built up, right, to do good surgical care. Respiratory therapy is part of that. So we would love to work with you. We have a nursing fellowship that Lori's heading, but she's a surgical nurse. But we need nurses on the floor. We need nurses in the ICU, nurses in the ER. We need all these to build out these fellowships for nurses for these hospitals, because we can just go on and on. But you have to have nurses in all these areas, and we need to build these fellowships out.
Well, and I think what's interesting about our program is that we are training that NRP program, but we're going to full disciplines. So we have OT, respiratory therapists that are getting trained on the basic NRP program to translate that training over there. So we don't want to kind of narrow it down to respiratory therapy. We want to open it up.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I think having that training for the people on the ground at all aspects, all disciplines, I think is really important. It's kind of what, I think is what we're seeing and will need to do. So, we'd love to talk to you more about that.
It's the best thing that comes out of Q&As is we add new people to our team. Yeah. Truthfully.
All right. Any last questions? Send it in the chat or raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll finish with one last question. All right. Yeah, Kim.
These are going through the Office of International Programs.
All right. So through this process,
none of this happens without Kim. That is absolutely correct. And none of this would be happening without Kim.
She's, I would say, the most important member.
And the person who showed me bending the arc was Kim Cobb.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
all right. Final question. What was the most rewarding piece in this making of the documentary for you?
I think for me, it was just, presenting this in front of the local Ethiopian community and seeing how emotional they got behind this and how important this was to them. And, just affecting people and being able to even open the eyes up for people, give people hope. Just that feeling of giving someone hope is huge. Even though we do have impact, I think just giving people hope in these times is the most important thing in my eyes. And I feel really good when I see that.
For me, Dr. actually showed it on the film, but Dr. Solomon is the first foot and ankle surgeon in Ethiopia, period. And in that whole corner of Africa, he was trained here at the University of Kansas Hospital. And, I had a role in that. This whole team did. But you wonder about the impact of your work. And I think you can see in that film, you see me ask Dr. Solomon, he's had his clinic for 2 months. And I said, so how many patients do you have after opening your clinic? Just 2 months, 240 patients. every day. And yeah, anytime, I love that. But you'll notice in that film, I didn't think I got quiet at that point, but it was because on the inside I got a little bit choked up because I was like, wow, we did something good here. So I think it's just seeing things like that and getting to show people the impact they can have. I love that about the documentary.
For me, I'm an incredibly young filmmaker, straight out of college. I was taken into this group and given so much responsibility, but also so much credit as a professional in my area, and being able to make decisions that help impact lives as it has already done, as it will go on to do. It's very rewarding, especially in an area where very often you work on things that aren't so impactful in people's lives. I work in film, I do live events at times, and maybe watching a UFC fight doesn't change everyone's life, but this can change a lot of people's lives, and that's given me a lot of self-respect, selfishly. Thank you.
For me, the most rewarding part has been the relationships I've made along the way, whether it's from the people I met in Ethiopia, my nurse fellow, the physician fellows, the stories we're telling, down to the people I work with every day on this project. So that to me has just been incredibly rewarding, and it's grown me in ways that I simply can never quantify. On an even like today, the relationships that we have together on this team is pretty amazing. So that is without a doubt my most rewarding part of this documentary.
Yeah, and it's really cool just seeing how many things are happening. The more people that want to get involved. So as Dr. Evans said, if you guys want to get involved, please reach out to us. This is about something bigger than us, and that's where the reward really is.
And thank you so much for everybody who came in person and also on Zoom. Let's give a round of applause.